All right, guys. Well, after a couple of, I don't know, useless days, Wednesday was Veterans Day. That's always kind of a bummer. And on top of it, got all dressed up to go see John's grave, and it rained all day. I did shoot a short video that I will post along with this late for Veterans Day, but I'm going to post it anyway, I guess. I don't know. Then, because I have a car that has a serpentine belt that runs around 5 pulleys or whatever that have lips on them and 1 pulley that is rounded over, anytime you hit a puddle with my car, the serpentine belt can come off. Like literally, you can't drive through a puddle and you can't drive through the snow without the serpentine belt coming off. So I had that happen on top of everything else. So it's been kind of a lost couple of days, unfortunately. But I've wanted to get back to talking about Mike Pettine because my cousin Jeff up in Madison asked me a great question, and that is, you know, how hot is Mike Pettine's seat after the 49ers game, after some success in the 49ers game? And I think it's a great question. I posited that Mike Pettine, if I was Matt LaFleur, would have to reach some milestones during that 49ers game to keep his job even in season. Understanding that it was very unlikely that Pettine would be fired mid-season unless they had another terrible outing like they did against the Minnesota Vikings potentially or something like that. But again, we played a banged-up team. We know all the kind of offsetting, confounding factors to that. But it's still a great question, and I think in terms of, you know, the Green Bay Packers, a very stable organization. They're not like us fans. They don't fly off the handle after one game. However, sometimes can be accused of potentially hanging on to guys longer than they should. Mike McCarthy, Dom Capers. There is, to my mind right now, there's very little that changes about Pettine's situation after the season has ended. From what I'm seeing, the best I can, I will say this. I would not want to be the defensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers right now. You've got inside linebacker, a position that the Packers do not value, so they're not going to bring in stud inside linebackers for you. So you end up with 2 rookies there. You have one oft-injured Christian Kirksey that has been unavailable, completely unavailable this season, and didn't play well when he did. That's a big challenge for a position that is going to make the majority of your tackles on a football team, and then you get the criticism of not being able to stop the run. Well, to some extent, it's the players that make the tackles, and that's a particular challenge. And then lately, without Kevin King in, we've also had some shuffling at the cornerback position. To me, the biggest concern right now is the fact that we've got 3 pass rushers on the field at the same time, and not a single dang one of them can get home. Now, it looks to me, so if I'm the defensive coordinator, here's what I'm seeing from the film I'm watching, and as best I can parse it out, is Mike Pettine's pretty dang scared to do anything super aggressive. And as much as I would like to see a more aggressive defense, I would be hard-pressed to be too aggressive with these inside linebackers that we've got, and now potentially this week without Jair Alexander or Kevin King, because Josh Jackson is just terrible. He's hard to watch. How do you do that? Anytime you send extra pass rushers, you give up coverage, and I think that's what Pettine is doing right now. Does that mean he gets a pass at the end of the season? I don't think so. I really don't. I think that the seat is just about as hot as it was in terms of the evaluation at the end of the season. Matt LaFleur is going to look back and say, okay, well, you know, I didn't pull the trigger after the Minnesota Vikings game. We waited for the 49ers game. Okay, we performed admirably there, but that we understand the situation that team was in. So the only thing I can see changing this, because obviously there's practically, you know, there's half a season still to play, is this. Anyway, let me go back just for a second, because what I see Pettine doing, I believe he's got the inside linebackers back about 2 yards deeper than I'd like to see them, but I can't really argue to move them up either, because they're playing bad even from where they're at, with extra time to look, extra time to read their keys. but also greater distance after their trigger before contact, I think we're going to still have problems against the run. Pettine has put basically a helmet in every run gap on obvious rushing downs and tried to offset the inexperience of our inside linebackers by dropping them a little bit deeper. You see other teams like the Minnesota Vikings, they've got their inside linebackers 2 yards closer to the line of scrimmage. We just don't have the guys that can do that because they're struggling as it is. Then you add the cornerback situation, and obviously we know he prefers coverage to defending against the run, and that's I actually agree with that. You still have to be able to do both, but what he's doing on obvious rush downs should stop the run. And we're, to some extent, we're getting it done. I mean, we're giving up 50 yards a ball carrier. Now, that doesn't include, of course, the Dalvin Cook situation with the Minnesota Vikings, which I will say once again, I have never seen a defense play so out of position. It had nothing to do with the defense being, in my opinion, the mistakes we made against the Minnesota Vikings were all on the, not all on the players, but you had the situation that's kind of hurting you, where your position, your inside linebackers are, what formations you're running, et cetera, the fact that we can't get to the quarterback up front. But a lot of that had to do with players just not playing fundamental football that you should know by the time you come out of high school. And certainly as top college recruits drafted into the NFL, which not all of our guys are, that's always the case, it was just a travesty to watch these guys, especially guys like Preston Smith that are making a lot of money, do stuff that just made zero sense to me. And it almost looked to me like they're trying to get Pettine fired. They're going to get their wish at this point, I would think. But, and again, I try to never go to motive because that's the hardest thing to determine, but it just was so bad. You can understand it out of, Kadar Holman, Chris Barnes, you can understand it out of those guys. Even Josh Jackson, to some extent, he hasn't gotten on the field. You'd like to see him improve. He had a couple games where he was okay. But I think Pettine is scared to do anything aggressive right now, and I think he's got good reason. These guys aren't playing very well. But, again, does that exonerate Pettine from the situation? No, it doesn't, because he's the guy that has to motivate these guys to play when the players cannot. And obviously, in the absence of fans, we need a Jamal Williams who can just walk out in front of a TV screen and dance around, get juiced up, and go out and play good football. And Z isn't able to do that. There's got to be something else. It's got to be, he's got to get juiced up first before I think the defense gets going. And that, again, ultimately goes back to Mike Pettine. He's going to have to, I think, start off, you're playing the Jacksonville Jaguars. So start off a little more aggressive, blitz a little more right out of the gate. You got a rookie quarterback in Luton who is only starting his second game. I know he threw for 304 yards and a touchdown, but I think you've got to do something to get this defense juiced up. So here's the two things. If I was going to entertain Pettine being defensive coordinator next year with, the situation is not great. But again, he's going to be judged by the production of the defense regardless of the situation. Number one would be against Jacksonville, he finds a way to get this defense juiced up when they need it. If that's some kind of exotic blitz that Luton's not ready for, he's got to have that in his bag of tricks, period. We know that's his thing. He's been afraid to do it. If he can do that and he can pull the trigger on that when he needs it in games, like say if you were to take back the NFC Championship game and he did that, got the defense juiced up and we actually had a chance in that game where we're playing good defense. If he does that moving forward as needed, and the other thing is, I can understand him he's playing the numbers, you can tell. He knows that if you stop the run, get to 3rd and long, this defense is going to have a chance to get home. He also knows he does not have his full complement of perimeter cornerbacks. He's going to get those guys back. He's trying to just win games. The most important thing is to win these games, not to do it in style. We always look for sacks and interceptions. What Mike Pettine is looking for is wins until he can get his guys back. And I posited this about Mike McCarthy for a couple of years, and I think I was just plain wrong. I don't think he knew it. if there is some kind of scope and sequence to what he's doing, he understands that he's a little bit dinged up now. If he can get guys back healthy, then he can start rolling out some of the stuff that he's had in his playbook all along, but did not want to show during the regular season so much, in games that he thinks he can win anyway by just, having a hat in each gap, trying to play good fundamental football, which the defense is just not doing right now. And then all of a sudden we see him roll out the D train that we saw last year. More so than just, Zadarius Smith is going to be a rover on the inside and then we'll get Gary on the field with him. More so than that. I got to see more than that. Then I think this defense, because we still got the bodies to some extent to be good. You get Jair Alexander back, you get Kevin King back, which I think is huge. And you've got a chance to cover on the back end, which leaves no excuse whatsoever for one of those pass rushers of ours not to get home, for all of them together to be disruptive. And where's Kenny Clark? I mean, for crying out loud. Is Mike Pettine coaching Kenny Clark out of the games? Because he sure as heck hasn't seemed to show up for the last few since he came back from injury. So if in fact Pettine can roll out some new stuff that he's been holding close to the vest, then I will say he's been all along, he's just been playing the numbers because he's pretty sure we can win. You look at that Vikings game, I guarantee if our guys played good fundamental football, tackled the way they're supposed to, got to the spot that they were supposed to, and got there fast, we'd have won that game. We still should have won that game if we'd have just protected on the last couple of plays and Aaron Rodgers doesn't have the fumble because he gets caught up from behind because our offensive line had a bad game. Now, I'm not, I'm not taking I'm not giving the defense a pass. In any way, I'm not giving Pettine a pass, but I'm certainly not giving these players a pass when they play the way they did against the Minnesota Vikings. So there's a lot that needs to be fixed. And again, good fundamentals, well, that goes to coaching too. So as far as the answer to the question, I don't think Mike Pettine's seat is any hotter necessarily, but it ain't cooled down a whole lot either. I would expect that Matt LaFleur looks at this and is very much right now even, well, not now so much, but he's going to be thinking about whether LaFleur, I hope, understands that the easiest part is to fire. The hardest part is to hire the guy that's going to make changes that are going to be meaningful and get this defense where it needs to be. If he's got some guys in mind, I definitely see him moving on. It's the perfect opportunity to say, unless Mike Pettine turns it on, the defense turns it around, and then we go win a Super Bowl, I think Mike Pettine gets fired. He just hasn't performed, and we've been, as much money as we spent to bring in these guys. Again, it's the same defensive players for the most part as we had last year, minus Fackrell and Martinez. And they're not performing very well at all. But again, it's going to go to the coach. It's his head that's going to roll. I expect Mike Pettine to be gone after this year. I don't think Matt LaFleur, he's not a Matt LaFleur guy, so I don't think Matt LaFleur is going to be married to Mike Pettine in any way. But I do think he's going to have a guy come in, and that's why I wasn't for firing mid-season, because I think Matt LaFleur has yet to have to be a head coach that handles everything. I mean, Mike Pettine, as a former head coach, knew how to handle virtually all of the defensive coordinator role without any problem. LaFleur really having to do very little in that situation, I would think. Again, I don't know how hands-on he is, but I got to be honest, and you can tell me what you think. I don't get the feeling that he's super hands-on. I get the feeling that he's like, okay, here's some things I want to see, and then let's Mike Pettine do his job. And I have nothing against that. I've always said, hire good people and get the heck out of their way. But in this case, it's just not, the performance just isn't there. And, obviously we can have some good games against some bad teams. The question is going to be what happens in the playoffs. And I think that will be pretty much the determining factor if Mike Pettine gets this team playing at the top level that it was playing like last year, for example, where Zadarius is just wrecking games and Preston not far behind. Rashawn Gary comes on. I mean, that front could be formidable with Kenny Clark in there. We were all excited about having Rashawn Gary, ZP, and Kenny Clark all on the field at the same time. That should be a game-wrecking front 5, front 7, you know, the front 7 part we get into a little trouble with because we just didn't do anything at inside linebacker. Well, we did. I credit Brian Gutekunst for trying. Everybody says he didn't do anything. Well, the fact of the matter is he did. He brought in a replacement for Blake Martinez, who had exactly as many tackles as Blake Martinez. We was injured, so we could afford him. And I think that's the thing that's forgotten is Brian Gutekunst couldn't afford to do what everybody wants him to just do as if there's an open checkbook. And then he brought in Funchess. Funchess opted out. He could have been, with Lazard out, he could have made 1 or 2 catches in that Minnesota Vikings game that made the difference between a win and a loss. But again, we're moving forward and we've got, you know, plenty of things to be positive about. Defense can start to stack successes potentially. We would, and again, I truly believe if Mike Pettine just sits down and says, listen guys, you know, the last thing we want is for the Jacksonville Jaguars to score on their first drive. They scored on their first drive against the Texans last week, and that was a big reason that they were still kind of in that game. However, you got a rookie quarterback starting his second game. And if Mike Pettine says, all right, guys, we're not playing the numbers on that first series. We're going to loose the hounds. You got to get home. We want to batter this guy. Kenny, I'm looking at you. Z, I'm looking at you. P, I want to see you destroy some people. And let's get the guys behind it to follow it up in case anything goes wrong, but also be prepared because we know we've got guys on this defense that can knock the ball free, that can force the ball to be thrown up in the air, that can tip the ball, be ready to follow it up. Let's get a turnover, let's get a sack, let's hurt this guy early. And then potentially down the road, because our team can score, we're averaging 32 points a game, we'll go back to the mode that we were at, but we'll be a little more juiced because we started out with a little bit more aggressiveness. I think Pettine, when he gets his full complement of cornerbacks back in particular, both the perimeter cornerbacks, I think he has to start blitzing a little bit more, even though it's a risk. He has to do it still carefully and as well-timed as possible, but I think his defensive play calling right now is what's going to make the difference between him having his job or not. Still on the hot seat. Defense with a lot of big names is just underperforming, amazingly underperforming after coming on strong last year. We've gone from week 1 last season, Aaron Rodgers saying we've got a defense when the offense couldn't perform. And now we've got one of the best offense, and the defense, you know, just, you know, you got double-digit sacks on both edge rushers. You got Rashawn Gary coming on. He's second year as a 12th overall pick. And then this year happens. What do we have, a total of 8 sacks? Something like that? Just absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, definitely something's got to change, but the bodies are still there for the most part. It would be good to get, I think, Kamal Martin back, and I think Barnes was on COVID, went to the COVID list. I don't know what his situation is. And I speak disparagingly of their play because it's been bad, but I love their attitude. They're playing for jobs. They're not playing on big contracts. They're playing for big contracts. However, it's just they're rookies. You know, they're going to make mistakes, just like Darnell Savage last year. Darnell Savage is another one I want to see come on. But yeah, I think Mike Pettine would likely be gone after this year. It would just seem to make sense. If we hang on to him another year, I hope that's because Zadarius Smith looked like the next Reggie White, and Preston came back on like he did last year, and Rashawn Gary ended the year with like 8 sacks after doing 0 or 1 or whatever it is up until this point in half a year. It just have to be a massive turnaround to me, or I am seriously considering moving on. So serious consideration then means I'm gonna look at the field. I'm gonna see what options are out there that I think are realistic, folks that I think I can bring in, and whether it be a young guy like a Jim Leonard and I think a lot of people are calling for Rex Ryan. And I think they're forgetting that Mike Pettine is Rex Ryan's guy. Like, that's the same defense, I believe. I don't know that that's an answer. I don't know that you can get him out of retirement. He's looking fat and happy. I would potentially be looking a little bit different route, but that's the biggest question. And again, I've mentioned, and I want to close with this, this question isn't about Mike Pettine. This question is about Matt LaFleur. The defensive performance comes down to Matt LaFleur, not Mike Pettine. So his decision to move on, potentially from Pettine, is a very important one in that it comes with the challenge of replacing him with somebody better. Anybody that thinks that Mike Pettine's too stupid to do this or that is just not even thinking straight. Now, I know I've probably said as much while watching some of these games and some of these performances because it's a challenge just to watch them. But that's just not the case. So you've got to come up with somebody that's going to, boot. I think part of what we need is aggressiveness, but you've got to have a little intuition, because aggressiveness can be exploited in the NFL in particular. You're always, if you're stopping the run, you're always giving yourself, I thought somebody was coming from behind. You're always making yourself vulnerable in the passing game if you sell out to stop the run. So you got to have somebody that's, has the right degree of aggressiveness, has enough tricks up his sleeve, but then also somebody that can motivate. That's the one thing that I don't see in Mike Pettine. I mean, he's very cerebral. He looks very tough, but he is anything but inspiring. I don't know about you guys, but it's just like, okay, yeah, doing your job is very important, because you can't get too deep into the emotional part, but you need to do your job, but you need to do it with emotion, I think, especially as a defensive player in the NFL. And I just don't see any of that. And that's the thing that really, to be honest, concerns me much more so than his scheme. Everything about Mike Pettine's scheme right now says he read the press clippings that we can't stop the run. So he put like 5 guys on the line of scrimmage with a mic behind him, and a deep one so he can read, because he's got a rookie. And then he tried to cover behind that the best he can, which is a little bit of a shift for him. And yet, with the situation at hand, we're still not able to get it done. Now you're vulnerable against the pass, which is the most dangerous offensive part of football is the passing game. To me, there's just no question about it. That doesn't mean that the run game isn't valuable. It certainly is. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting end of the season. It's going to be an exciting one. I'm super positive. We've got a freaking fantastic offense, guys. Getting David Bakhtiari back, getting our full complement of offensive weapons back, and this is a team that can win without a Davante Adams. We can win. Davante comes back without an Aaron Jones. We can win without A.J. Dillon or Jamal Williams. And Alan Lazard's been gone this whole time too. He's coming back. So lots to be excited about. Again, there's just this feeling in the back of my mind that if somebody could motivate Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith right now, this defense could get a little bit back to form to where they were when they were able to get teams. And listen, how much of this has to do with Kenny Clark? Like, Kenny Clark is your nose tackle. I know on running downs, a lot of times he's just stacking 2 guys, and it's the linebacking situation that's really the problem. But Kenny Clark, I think, needs to turn it on. And then we'll get to those 3rd and longs, and then all these guys, and then you can start really having some fun as a edge rusher, and if you're Kenny Clark, as an edge rushing interior D lineman, who just got paid, by the way. So anyway, I do think if I was going to put money on it, I would say Mike Pettine's gone at the end of the year. And we're going to be a successful team, I believe. We're going to be a playoff team, but that's not, the Green Bay Packers. We're not just about making the playoffs, and we're a little spoiled, we got to admit, in that regard. Not many teams can be that. Let me try not to get killed here. Although it'd make for great TV. Finally be famous as I get smucked by a truck. So it seemed like there was some other stuff I wanted to talk about. I'm just walking. I finally got out, and the sun is finally shining. So I was like, I'm going to take a walk. We're going to finally do this video. And but I really like what Matt LaFleur's doing with this offense. I'm pretty positive. The team, if Mike Pettine is playing the numbers right now, just saying, listen, we're gonna stack bodies up front on obvious rushing downs, and then we're gonna just kind of hold out, with what Kadar Holman and Josh Jackson now, which is the biggest concern, I think, against the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's why I'm a little iffy on calling for Mike Pettine to be more aggressive in this game. But for that first series, just shake him up. Just shake him up. He's a rookie, man. He at Oregon State, for crying out loud. Mike Pettine ought to have something in the book that this guy is just plain not ready for. It's his offensive line that really, and their interior is pretty good, but those tackles are vulnerable. So I expect Preston and Z to have a good day, but I've been expecting that for a lot of bad offensive lines, and they have had answers just about every time so far. So I hope what it is that Mike Pettine is playing a little bit of a conservative game with the notion that we're going to get guys back because we had an early bye week. So we already could have somewhat pre-planned this. You could have seen it coming. We've talked about it. Kept things a little bit close to the vest, played a little bit more like, let's just be there, be sound. We've got a great offense. We're going to win these games. Now, the Vikings game, of course, then becomes like, well, what the heck happened? Well, guys weren't sound. And then toward the end of the season, as things get a little bit schedule-wise easier, and some are saying we have the easiest schedule going into the playoffs, then we can start. In fact, even if we can go through the entire regular season without having to pull out any of the stops, then we've got basically potentially some unscouted looks for a playoff run when it really matters that we can pull out at the right time. Now, can Mike Pettine do it? I thought Mike McCarthy was going to do it with like Aaron Jones, and it just never happened. So I don't know if that's even in their pedagogical wheelhouse right now, but I sure hope so, because I think we've got all the potential in the world to do something like that. And I can see, if you're Mike Pettine, you have this meeting with Z and P at the beginning of the season, say, listen guys, it's going to be a little bit more boring of a year. Probably we're going to be playing a little slower. We're going to be collapsing the pocket very carefully this year because we had struggled against the run. We don't want to see that happen again. And because, we know we can win games. What we're trying to do is win games, but here's what I've got for you when the playoffs roll around. Here's what I've got for you when we go up against teams with offenses that are not, the Jacksonville Jaguars. So we'll see if that's the case. I have to admit, I have my doubts as to whether it is. And I think many in Packer Nation may very well hope it's not, because you don't want to sweep anything under the rug. But I do think there's a certain genius to coaches being careful about what they roll out at what time. And Bill Belichick, I think, does this as well as anybody. You've got guys like Tomlin that every once in a while will throw in a trick play, stuff like this, and just have the timing down is important there too. But whether or not that's going to happen, I think remains to be seen. If the philosophy that we've been rolling with, this conservative philosophy, is what we roll with by the end of the year, I think this offense gives us a chance at a Super Bowl. I don't think there's a chance that we win one because the AFC is just too strong, especially offensively. I just don't see it. I don't see our defense being able to hold up. Might be able to get ourselves in a shootout. I know what I was going to talk about potentially. I'll probably talk about this in my game plan as well. I'd like to see with Jacksonville's run defense, I'm interested in the potential of, I know Aaron Jones, Silverstein says it's all got to run through Aaron Jones, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but I'd like to see some A.J. Dillon in this one. I know I've been calling for it all year, but I want to know what this Packers team has in A.J. Dillon. The wind's going to be swirling. It's not going to be great weather once again. We know how much of a factor that was. And obviously we can throw on these guys too. What team can't do whatever they want, basically, especially the number 3 scoring offense, number 7 overall offense in the league. We should be able to do what we want. But I think one of the keys for Jacksonville is to have Luton get back there and throw the ball. They've got some good receivers. We've got a banged up cornerback group. And if they can pull that off, they've got a chance. If we can slow the game down a little bit, at least early, and then get out to a lead, then I think good things will happen. But I would like to see by the end of this game, by the end of one of these games, and I think this is another great one, just a little bit of A.J. Dillon kind of pounding for a series and potentially getting even in the end zone. I would love to see that for him. I think it'd be a big boost for his morale as a rookie who had to kind of sit out a game due to COVID and get a chance to come back and make a little bit of a difference. Might be good. All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for me for today. I will be on in just an hour or so, I guess, for another live broadcast. But I appreciate each and every one of you. Hope you have a great day. Talk to you again soon. Go Pack. All right, guys, well, I am not going to be able to do the full video that I had hoped. I just got in. It had stopped raining for a moment. It's just been raining all day. But I am going to show you the Veterans Memorial Park while I say yet another thanks to all our men and women who serve both at home and abroad, and especially to those who have given the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. It's a dreary day, and to some extent that is appropriate. I'm going to head back to the car quickly. Just wanted to show you around here. And then I'm going to head out to John's grave. I will make sure and take some pictures while I'm there. And sorry that I wasn't able to do a full-fledged video, but I just did want to get this little view. And the flag with it's hanging low today, no wind. It's a very dreary day, and I'm going to have to get out of the rain, unfortunately. But again, I just think it's pretty appropriate to some extent. And right up there, beyond the flag, is the flag. And that's where I'll head to go give my respects to my buddy John. We'll talk to you again soon.
Pettine Worldwide.